Jeff, always a pleasure to be with you, my friend. We got a great topic today. We always talk about the phenomenal lessons that we glean from our mentors and trusted colleagues, but we don't ever talk about the great lessons that we learn from our bad managers. We've all had them in our career at some point. We've had a manager where for whatever reason they didn't like us or they led from a spreadsheet instead of from the front. But whatever it was, we've all had some tricky managers in our day. Tell me some lessons, things that you've learned to do and maybe not to do because of bad management.
Yeah, for the most part, I'd say that over the course of my career, I've been fortunate in that I've generally liked the people that I've worked for. And that's true even of the folks that have made certain mistakes, and I've always had good relationships with my bosses, which is good. That being said, I think there's definitely a lot of things I've learned from the times where I've maybe felt demoralized or unmotivated in specific situations, and kind of getting a pulse on like why I felt that way and what a leader could have done differently in some of those situations. And it's not an easy job, right? And so I think first and foremost, I have to give some empathy to the people who are trying, and something that we can all try to improve on. But for me, I'd say like one of the biggest things, as someone who works in like some of these like earlier stage startups, um, I'd say that in I've worked in environments where we were not as data driven as we probably should have been, where we were probably shooting from the hip or using intuition, perhaps not leaning on experts as much as we should have at the time. There's people that you sometimes need to reach out to for help in certain situations, especially when you're a young company and you want to defer to people who have done it before. So I'd say that that's probably one of the bigger takeaways. I think that also um, there's something to be said for kind of like reading the room in specific situations with people. Like there have been times where I think I've been given good advice, but was probably given to me at like the wrong time or the wrong moment, perhaps not reading the room about like a certain event that happened, or maybe on the end of like a 4-day trip where I was in 4 different cities, getting like a very critical piece of feedback when I'm exhausted and feel like I've really like done a lot to try to make a sacrifice for a company or something like that. I think there's like kind of a way to like read the room on like when is the right time to give certain feedback, and how to give that feedback. It's not that it's like bad feedback, uh, or that it's inappropriate in any way, but it's more about like making sure that it gets delivered in a way where it's going to be received well, and that the action items will actually be incorporated. I'm very fortunate. Like right now, in my current role, I'm not just saying this because it's to suck up to my boss, but I've got a great leader in the company. And one of the things that I really appreciate too from working with him is it actually has given me an ability to kind of like reflect on other leaders I've worked with in the past. And something that I think I'm proud of the way we operate in our business today is like we're very data driven, and the way that we resolve conflict is always through a medium of respect. And that's something that I really appreciate, as somebody who has taken tons of criticism over the years. It's good to find people that, give you critical feedback in a way where they're not attacking you personally, but where you have the impression that they are actually wanting to do it for your own benefit. And that's something that I think is just, really good leaders are able to find that balance. What about you, Carson? Tell me a little bit about, some of the things you've learned from poor managers.
Yeah, I like that a lot, Jeff. And it's interesting because you compare and contrast. I work currently for my favorite manager that I've ever had, and it's interesting because she challenges me in ways that legitimately make me better, give me constructive feedback. But you look back, and there's a lot of different types of managers out there. There's micromanagers who will nickel and dime you on every little piece of minutia and don't really focus on the grand vision. I see that as very short-sighted. That type of approach has taught me, how I want to make sure that I take a very holistic lens at the business. I don't think data should be used to beat your people over the head. It's to diagnose gaps in process. And so if we can all agree that your result is, that is not satisfactory or isn't where you want it to be, we can all agree that that result is something that we want to tweak. We need to look at the process. Where are we maybe broken in the process, and how can we work together to fix that? I've also had the absentee manager, the manager that was never really around. Had that a couple of times in my career, and in some ways it can be okay if you're autonomous, if you're greenlit, and you're able to kind of do what you need to do. The challenge is you're not being challenged. You're not being given those motivators to move up and to achieve more. And I think that's where it can stunt your growth as a leader. Is when you have that absentee manager because you have somebody that's not really around. You're kind of left to your own devices. I performed well, but could I have done more? Could I have had more insight? Could I have had more coaching and mentorship? Those are the key questions. I also think about the inexperienced manager. Jeff, you hit on this. I think it's important to realize that a sales culture is not set at the sales manager level. It's set above. Sales managers have to make sure that they're also being trained and coached, given the tools and the ingredients for success. And if they're not, can we really blame that inexperienced manager? I've had managers that are brand new in the role, and I think there's been conflict where I was very confident and successful in role, and I think there were some clashes. Probably in my younger days, maybe that fell more on me because I was immature as a person and a seller. But in my older days, I think there might have been a conflict because perhaps they felt some imposter syndrome. And so I do think it's important to have some empathy there and to work with them in order to make them the hero. Now, what I learned about that is the importance of credibility. And so, I'm glad I talk about this all the time. I'm glad that I carried a bag as long as I did as a seller. Because it gave me credibility when I stepped into a leadership role, having done the role, and it helped me to be able to help my team see around corners and know what was coming, and to serve them in a way that was natural and augmented their strengths, as opposed to just looking to tell them what to do, how to do it, and why they weren't good enough. And I think the last one that I would point out would be the ones that are not communicative enough. I've had some inconsistent managers in my day. And what's interesting is sometimes they'll stumble upon these great ideas, but then they won't see them through. And so what I mean by that is I had a leader once upon a time that was, made this decision to be super transparent. And it was actually, we thrived. They were really sharing some of the insights of the business, what they were up against, what they were up against in the market, sharing analysis, sharing budgetary numbers and things like that. We thrived because we felt like we were really a part of something. But then they went away from that. Not sure why, but it was a lack of the communication and clarity that I think really changed the dynamic there and caused us to lose faith in that leader. So that instilled in me that need to always be communicative, sometimes probably overly so. My team will probably tell you that I communicate too much sometimes, but all in for good reason, and never about things that are things that I could look up for myself. It's all things that I want to make sure that they know about to arm them with, but also that level of transparency and clarity in the business so that they know what I'm hearing from senior leadership. Because if we're all listening to what senior leadership is saying and what our customers are saying, and we're formulating a way to address that and to solve those problems, that's how we're going to be successful. So those are some key lessons that I learned because of bad or inconsistent or inexperienced leadership in my long career.
Good stuff. Thanks, Carson. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. We'll see you next time.